Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, Paperbacks from Hell and some other shocking trash. It's my wrap up for week 2 of GarbAugust. So you may remember that the theme of week 2 of GarbAugust was shock value. GarbAugust, of course, being the annual reading event I run every August, dedicated to the joy of reading trashy books. And I'm wearing my official GarbAugust T-Shirt again today with the Don't Panic, Read Trash motto on it. If you want one of these T-shirts, and they are available in other less vibrant colours, I'll leave a link in the description to the Bonfire site where you can buy them. All the proceeds go to PEN America, a very worthwhile cause. I'll also leave a link in the description, or also leave details in the description to the video of all of the weekly prompts, the bingo card, and all of the many GarbAugust co-hosts who've all been putting up fantastic content this week as well. So do check out their channels if you're not already subscribed to them. So I've got a bunch of different trashy books to talk to you about today. I got through again quite a lot this week. I was on holiday from work this week, so managed to get quite a lot of reading done. I've read 4 books that you would probably classify as paperbacks from hell, and a few other things as well. So let me talk to you about what I've been reading. So the first thing I read was definitely a paperback from hell. It's one of those books that's been republished in the Paperbacks from Hell line, and that was Stage Fright by Garrett Boatman. My experience with this and with the other official paperback from hell that I read this week is in thinking that probably one of the main, and I suppose this is an obvious thing to say, but I suspect one of the main criteria for the books that have been republished as paperbacks from hell is both that they could get the rights to the actual content of the book and the original cover. I don't think the fact that books are included in the Paperbacks from Hell line is an automatic guarantee of quality. Let's put it that way. But this was, both the books I read that were Paperbacks from Hell were fun. So this was the first of those, Stage Fright by Garrett Boatman, and it was interesting. It's kind of science fiction-y, in that it's about this new technology which is labelled Dreamies, which is kind of like movies, but you experience them through all of your senses, so they feel like dreaming. And it's particularly about one guy who's made a career out of making these things, which are often have very shocking and violent content. And there's kind of a blurring of reality and the world of the Dreamies in this book. So it did have some really fun kind of gory horror scenes, particularly towards the end. The end of the book was really entertaining, but I found I got quite lost through the book as I was reading it in terms of what was actually supposed to be going on. So it was fun, and definitely had like an 80s vibe to it, but I didn't unreservedly love it by any means. Let me talk about things out of order then. So the other official paperback from hell I read this week then was Killer by Peter Tonkin. Peter Tonkin, a British author who wrote that, and I have to say, both Killer and this book had really good introductions. So the introduction to this one is by Will Erickson. The introduction to Killer was by Grady Hendrix, and they're really interesting about the history of the book and its kind of position in the horror genre. So Killer is about a killer whale written, or published, should we say, to cash in on the success of Jaws. Peter Tonkin has gone on to write kind of historical fiction and has written, I think, a couple of series more recently that have been quite successful. But Killer came out in the 70s. And it's interesting because it's more of what I would call an adventure novel than a horror novel. So it has got this killer whale in it. There's definitely some scenes of kind of gore and violence, but it's got a real kind of adventure explorer vibe to it. So it's got an expedition in a kind of Arctic wilderness. They get stuck on an ice floe basically, and are harangued by this killer whale. It did have a nice central relationship at the heart of it between a father and daughter, both of whom are scientists. So I thought that was quite well handled. And certainly the kind of action and adventure type scenes are fun too. But it wasn't quite what I was expecting. It definitely feels more like a kind of British exploratory adventure type novel than it did a horror novel. But still, entertaining enough. So getting back into the order I read things, I actually read Killer third. I don't know why I need to tell you these things. Anyway, so the next thing I was going to be reading for my attempt to tick off the you wouldn't read it on the bus square on the bingo card was The Judith Spy by Nick Carter, which has this very salacious cover. However, when I started reading it, I went to log it on Goodreads. I realised I've actually already read this. I must have read it in one of the previous GarbAugust. So I put that aside, and I should have said that clearly that Stage Fright ticked off the Paperbacks from Hell square on the bingo card. So I put the Nick Carter book aside and instead read this wonderful volume, The Art of Ron Lesser, Volume 1, Deadly Dames and Sexy Sirens. So definitely a book I wouldn't read on the bus because it's got a slightly saucy cover and some slightly saucy pictures inside, and it's huge as well, so people could definitely see what you were reading. So this is edited by Bob Dice, Bill Cunningham and J. Kingston Pearce. Dice and Cunningham I've talked about before on the channel. They've edited a lot of the men's adventure type fiction, like fiction compilations and things like that I've talked about on the channel before. They do a wonderful job, and this was no exception. So Ron Lesser, who's still working today, he's been going for decades, is an artist who did primarily like paperback covers, and particularly kind of crime and western covers in like the 50s and 60s. Also did like movie posters and things like that. He did the poster which you probably would recognise. I'll see if I can find it in here, for High Plains Drifter, the Clint Eastwood movie. I can't find it, but anyway, as always with the Men's Adventure Library type stuff, gloriously presented, wonderful full colour reproductions of some of these covers, and some really interesting stuff in this book as well about the Ron Lesser's artistic method. So the vast majority of these covers, there would actually be a model who would come in, who would pose for them, and Lesser would take photographs and then do the paintings off those photographs. Really, really interesting stuff. Fantastic artwork in here. I really, really enjoyed this, and I do have the second volume to read as well, and there is a third volume on the way. So yeah, if you like this kind of vintage artwork, definitely recommend this. After that then, another book that you could definitely call a Paperback from Hell. I don't know if it's actually featured in Grady Hendrix' Paperback from Hell book, but it's Blood Circuit by Guy Smith. Guy Smith, a prolific British kind of pulpy horror writer of the 70s and 80s in particular, no longer with us sadly, but was publishing stuff up until his death, which was fairly recently. This was not his best book. So people in the comments have asked me what Guy Smith book would I recommend, and the one I would definitely recommend is Night of the Crabs, which is fantastic. A giant killer crab book. It spawned a load of sequels. It's really, really fun, and it's just been republished as well. A lot of Guy Smith stuff is out of print. I believe that there's a publisher who's got the rights to republish most of his stuff, and I think their republication of Night of the Crabs is the beginning of that. So hopefully they will get some more stuff out. Although I have to say the cover for the new edition of Night of the Crabs is terrible. I think I really don't like it. But anyway, Blood Circuit was definitely not Guy Smith's best book. It's about motor racing. There's like some sort of curse. I don't know. I really struggled to follow it. It's got some reasonable scenes of horror in it. It's got lots of scenes about motor racing, a little bit of sex. But it really failed to grip me, I'm afraid. But the cover is wonderful. Okay, moving on then. A much more successful British horror novel, Lair by James Herbert. So I actually ended up doing a review video of this one, which went up Thursday just gone. This was really, really fun. I enjoyed this enormously. I have read it before. This was my pick originally for Green on the Cover, but I think I read a book last week that gave me Green on the Cover as well for the bingo card. So I'd read this before, but not for a very long time. The sequel to The Rats by James Herbert, which is a really important book in the history of animal attacks type fiction. This was just phenomenally entertaining. A really, really solid sequel to the first book. The rats, these hordes of killer rats come back. This time, rather than being in London where they are in the first book, they're in Epping Forest, so like a rural location. And it was just really fun. Some really good animal attacks type scenes. And the thing that Herbert does really well in this book is build up the tension in that first third. So in the first third, he keeps on teasing that the rats are going to attack people, but they actually don't. So when they do, in the middle third of the book is just rats attacking people, basically. You've had that tension build up, and then you get this wonderful payoff in the middle third of the book. So I really enjoyed this. Okay, moving on then, a fantastically silly and enjoyable book, Kill Test by Graham King. So this was sent to me recently by one of our viewers, Pom Mum, in a nice little box of books. I'd never heard of this book. I'm really glad I've read it because it was supremely silly. It's kind of an espionage thriller in that the central character is a British spy who's given the mission of investigating this corporation called Kill Test Incorporated. And what Kill Test do is broadcast like gladiatorial combat to paying viewers, with the payoff being that people actually die in these contests. I might even do a review of this book because it was so interesting. So I'm not aware that Graham King wrote anything else. This book on the cover claims to be more savage than Rollerball, which it probably is, and more prophetic than A Clockwork Orange. I don't know about that, and I also don't know how you can say a book is prophetic when it's only just been published. Unless you've got a time machine, you can see into the future, and it definitely didn't turn out to be prophetic, I should say as well. So this company they're not broadcasting, but they film like these gladiatorial combat. They sell like basically film reels of it, and they also have like cinemas they've taken over where they have people like paying viewers come in and they broadcast live into those cinemas. So you've got kind of this spy plot wrapped around that, with this British spy trying to infiltrate them and bring them down. The reason they're like an American company or an international company, but the reason that the British guy is doing it is because there's like there's a mole in the CIA, basically, so the CIA can't do it. The thing that makes this book hilarious and ridiculous is the detail of the actual combats that happen in it, which are just ridiculous. So there's one called Electro Chess, where you have a giant chessboard and all of the players, all the pieces on the chessboard are real people. The person who is controlling them, like the player, if you like, is the king, and the person who checkmates the king gets to electrocute them with a cattle prod and kill them. Right? So that's one of them. The other one, which was even dafter, was a combat where the two people are fighting on like a raised platform above a pool of water that is like 7-8 feet deep. And the idea of the combat is to knock the other person off the platform so they fall into the water. The twist being that both of the contestants are wearing one boot that is really, really heavy. So if they get knocked into the water, they won't be able to swim and they'll drown. It's that kind of level of stuff. There's a really interesting chapter where the spy character is reading all this information about how the world has got to be as bad as this, and how there's this kind of thirst for violent entertainment, which was actually, it was nonsense, but it was actually kind of interesting. And that it talks about like increasingly violent comics and movies and things like that. And I hadn't heard of the comics that were talked about, but when I googled them, they're real. So that was actually quite interesting. But then it gets into the kind of ridiculous kind of part where it then talks about the author then starts making stuff up, a bit like an AI that's hallucinating, and talks about I can't remember what he calls it, but like an extreme version of rugby where basically there are no rules and everyone just beats each other up. So yeah, it was very, very silly, but I really, really enjoyed it. Oh, and there was a character, there's a mafia character in it called Carmine Tabasco, show as well, which I thought was wonderful. It was just absolutely daft, but I really, really enjoyed it a lot, as you can probably tell. After that then, I read a really interesting book. So this is a book, I talked about it last week, so I was reading it last week. I finished it this week. I'm really glad that this book exists. I'm not sure I loved it, and it's a book probably with quite limited appeal. So the book is Malibu Express by Brad Carter. So this is a novelisation of a movie by a guy called Andy Sidaris, who made like low budget action movies that were characterised by having lots of like topless women in them, basically. And this is a novelisation of I think it was his first movie, and the author and publisher are going to do a whole series of these. They've done the second one as well already, which is Hard Ticket to Hawaii. And the book was really entertaining, and it was definitely affectionately done. But the source material, if you like, is not great. So it was a bit of a strange experience reading it. As I say, I'm really glad that this book exists. And if you're an Andy Sidaris fan, you may well want to read it. But if you're not an Andy Sidaris fan, you probably won't want to read it. I guess will be my kind of overarching review of that one. After that then, another book that was sent to me a while ago by a viewer. This one was sent to me by a viewer called Franz. So this is The Missing and the Damned by Jonathan Steele. So Franz sent me an email, and I talked about this in the book haul video where I showed this. He sent me an email saying when he was a teenager, he and his family had been on holiday in Norfolk or somewhere like that. I think maybe where JD Vance is at the moment. They'd found this book in like a church jumble sale or something like that, and they'd all read it. Like him and his dad and his sister had all read it and really enjoyed it. And then like decades later, they ended up discussing it again at a family meal. And he tried to track down a copy of it and managed to track down a copy of it, despite the fact that this is a book that probably no one's ever heard of. It doesn't even have like a publisher listed on the cover at all. It's one of those like strange forgotten books, of which there are sadly so many. But it was really fun. I enjoyed reading it. So it's about this guy who's ex-military, who discovers he inherits some papers from a relative of his, and discovers that there's a cache of treasure of like gold hidden in this abbey. And it's about him like recruiting some other ex-military people to go to that abbey to get the gold, basically. And there's like this strange order of monks in the abbey. There's all sorts of like dodgy goings on that have been happening. So it was very, very, very silly again, but really quite entertaining. And I love the backstory of this book and how it came to be in my possession. I love the idea of these books that have just fallen by the wayside, but that, at a certain point in people's lives, like this book did with Franz and his family, when they read it, it really made an impact on them. And I love the idea of people then, trying to track down old bookish treasures from their own past, like Franz did with this one. So thank you again, Franz, for sending this to me. I had fun with it. So that's everything I've finished this week then. I've got 3 things on the go at the moment. So I'm continuing to read Rivals by Jilly Cooper. I say read, I've been listening to it on Audible, not on Audible, on Spotify. And I've now exhausted my Spotify hours. So you get 15 hours of listening, like audiobook listening a month with Spotify Premium. So you can see I've got that far through the book. So I'm now going to read, move over to reading it physically. So I've got about 300 pages left. It's really fun. I'm really, really enjoying this. It took a long time. The first third of the book really is like setting up all the characters and the relationships between them and things like that. And it's only now that about the halfway point really that the actual story is coming into view, what the rivalry is about. But it's really fun. I'm enjoying that a lot. I'm also reading this, so not a trashy book, although it's kind of a pastiche, so maybe that makes it slightly trashy. The House at Devil's Neck by Tom Mead, which came out this last week on the 14th of April, 14th of August. I'm really enjoying this. So I've talked about Tom Mead's books on the channel before. They're kind of golden age style mysteries with kind of locked rooms and fiendish puzzles and things like that. Spectre, who is the main detective, is a stage magician. And they're just really fun. They're full of kind of a nice vintage vibe and just intriguing mysteries. They're just nice, cosy reads. I really, really enjoy them. So yeah, I'm enjoying this very much indeed. And I was delighted to see when I flicked through the acknowledgements at the back before I started reading it, that I'm named in the acknowledgement. So among many other people, Tom Mead thanks what he labels as the online community of bloggers, bookstagrammers and booktubers who have been so supportive, and I'm one of the people he names. I think that's the first time that's happened to me. So that was really, really lovely to see. And then the other thing I'm continuing to read is No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy, which is the Criminally Book Club pick this month. So I'm a bit over halfway through. I think I'm enjoying it. I'm not sure. I do struggle a bit with Cormac McCarthy's writing style sometimes. And this book is one of those books where on the surface, it's exactly the kind of book I like. It's kind of a crime thriller with quite a bit of action in it. And some intriguing characters as well. Sugar, the kind of main villain of the book, is really, really fun to read. But at the same time, constantly it feels like Cormac McCarthy's trying to do something more. And it's that something more is a little bit opaque and I don't really get what it is and it's bugging me. So I'm kind of enjoying it, but not fully enjoying it. So yeah, that's what I'm reading at the moment. As we move into week 3 of GarbAugust, that is Cozy Week. So I have a few things I'm going to try and read for that. I've got a couple of animal mysteries, so a cat mystery and a dog mystery. I've got some middle grade trash. I've got this babysitter's mystery book. I've got a gothic romance. I may try and fit in a gothic romance. And given that the book I intended to read for category romance ended up not really being category romance, that was Cotton Moon by Catherine Tracy, I might read a Mills and Boon or something like that as well. So we shall see. In terms of channel stuff then, so in the last week, you've had my a tour of my new garage library, which I was very excited to share with everyone. You had an Abominable Book Club unboxing, which was quite fun to do. I hadn't done one of those for ages, so that was really entertaining. Entertaining for me anyway. I'm not sure if it was entertaining for you. And as I've said, my review of Lair by James Herbert. In the week ahead, I've got a book haul video, which I filmed already, which I just need to edit. I'm going to do a review, I think, of The Glamour by Christopher Priest, which I read recently and really enjoyed, and something else. I'm not sure what that other video is going to be yet. I haven't got an idea locked down in my head, so you may find that you don't get 3 more videos from me this week. You just get those 2. We'll see how I go. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed that. Do let me know what you've been reading this week, particularly if you've been reading some shocking stuff for week 2 of GarbAugust. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.